Well, first of all, I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. I wanted to thank the New York Society Library, Carolyn Waters and Sarah, for working with us. Thank you both. This is the oldest library, I've been told, in the city of New York. It's open to everybody. It's quite magnificent, actually. I wanted to say that, the Internet Archive's just really excited about really hosting this event for everyone. And we have one incredible author, Sarah Lamdan, who published Data Cartels, and I'm excited. I got a preview of a little bit of the book. It's a great read. In fact, there'll be some, if you want to get a copy ahead of time, right, Sarah? Yeah, you'll get a little bit of a discount for that. And I also want to thank Emily Drabinski. Also, she'll be moderating tonight, and she is, I guess, post-elect president of the American Library Association, so I'm excited to have her here. Thank you. She's also professor at CUNY in their graduate center, critical pedagogy. She kind of heads up that graduate school. So the Internet Archive, for many of you, you use the Internet Archive. Some of you may have not used it yet, but we're an incredible library, a digital library, and we have over 100 petabytes of data. So how does that break down? We literally have over 685 billion web pages on the Wayback Machine. We have 5 million different types of photographs. We have 2.2 million movies, and of course we're looking at movies and books. I think there's over 6 million books we've digitized. And so you can pretty much find anything you want on the Internet Archive. What's great, and I think what lines up really well with the values of this book, is the fact not only are we open source, but we are all about open access. We also are our values are very strong around privacy. And I think some of those will come up today. As I was reading through the book, I realized there is a sort of monopoly of information that is being collected and data analytics that's being used in ways that I'm sure this conversation will open up these conversations around that. One of the things is we're a nonprofit, the Internet Archive. We've been around for over 25 years. And so we've been digitizing information. And our mission is to provide universal access to all knowledge. So I work with hundreds of thousands of individuals around the country and around the world that support the work of the Internet Archive. If you're interested in any of the information that we've handed out, please find one of us. Jessica Cepeda is on my team, and Krupa Shind is here as well. We're more than happy to answer any questions you have. So I would like to get started, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Emily. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Is this on? Can you hear me? Is it on? Yes, okay, great. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I can't imagine here on this Banned Books Week a more important conversation than how we will take collective public ownership of our institutions and of all of the information that we're going to talk about tonight that's being collected and wielded against us by profit-seeking institutions. So super psyched to be here. I'll introduce our two speakers tonight. Sarah Lamdan, who I'm meeting for the first time tonight, but is one of the people who delights me most in the CUNYverse, is a professor of law with a master's degree in library science and legal information management. She teaches administrative law, environmental law, data privacy, information access, and government transparency courses. Her 2017 book, Environmental Information, Research, Access, and Environmental Decision Making, is a resource for journalists, scientists, and researchers who rely on government science. When she's not teaching, Professor Lamdan is active in national information access and data privacy research and organizations. She is a senior fellow with the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition and a fellow at the Engelberg Center on Innovation Law and Policy at NYU Law School. She's also a member of the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative and co-chair of the Invest in Open Infrastructure Community Oversight Council. And I'm just so pleased to be sharing the stage with someone whose analysis I really could not agree with more. I've read the whole book and am so excited to have this very readable, very accessible, very timely tool in our toolboxes. We're also joined by Brewster Kahle, a passionate advocate for public internet access and a successful entrepreneur. He's spent his career intent on a singular focus, providing universal access to all knowledge. He is the founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive, one of the largest libraries in the world. Soon after graduating from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he studied artificial intelligence, Kahle helped found the company Thinking Machines, a parallel supercomputer maker. In 1989, Kahle created the Internet's first publishing system called Wide Area Information Server, later selling the company to AOL. In 96, Kahle co-founded Alexa Internet, which helps catalog the web, selling it to Amazon.com in 1999. The Internet Archive, which he founded in 1996, now preserves 99 plus unique petabytes of data. The only thing that's missing is my brother made a website a long time ago mocking my sister for being the cheerful one in the family, and I can't find it in the Wayback Machine. But
Librarians will be hard at work.
Okay, yeah. Put it at the top of your list. The data, the books, web pages, music, television, and software of our cultural heritage. Working with more than 950 library and university partners to create a digital library accessible to all. So excited to share this conversation with you too. So I want to start with asking Sarah a little bit about your book, Data Cartels. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, hold on. I should have done this before we started. Okay. Yeah, first, I just have to mention how thrilling it is to be on the stage with Emily Drabinski and Brewster Kahle, people I very much admire. I'm so excited about Emily's leadership of the American Library Association. I think it's so important right now. And Brewster, your work is inspiring and it's
Thank you.
important, and I use it often in my work. So, yeah, thank you. The number of times I have thanked my lucky stars that I was able to find something in the Wayback Machine or find something that had been archived, especially even when writing this book. I actually probably cite to the Internet Archive sources from time to time. So, I guess something I'll say is when you're researching companies that tend to change their websites when they put things up that they later realize are unpopular, it's really nice to have a backup copy. So yeah, that gets me to why I wrote this book in the first place. So when I started thinking about the problems in this book, I was actually a librarian at CUNY, and I'm a law librarian. So that means that one of my jobs is to teach legal research. And when you teach legal research in the United States, you teach students how to use two platforms. One is called Westlaw, and the other one is called Lexis. Those are the two legal research platforms. Every year, thousands and thousands of law students learn how to use it. People like me train them. And then they go off into their careers and collectively spend millions and millions of dollars to buy these services. And it fuels the legal industry. There's a joke that whenever Westlaw goes down, somebody says there is no law. That happens every time Westlaw goes down. So these are core companies to the legal profession. And in 2017, right during the point of the Trump administration where people were really concerned about ICE, children were being separated from their parents, there was a lot going on. Donald Trump suggested that ICE build a extreme vetting program, which would have been like an in-depth tech surveillance program. And some intrepid journalists wrote an article. They did a FOIA request about everybody who would be attending or who attended the investor day for this extreme vetting program. So all the companies that were bidding to be a part of this surveillance system. And they reported that LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, the parent company for Westlaw, both sent representatives to this extreme vetting day. And I was really confused. I was like, okay, so are they like using case law? Like how is legal research playing into this extreme vetting program? So I started digging and I realized that they're not selling legal research products to ICE, they're selling personal data and personal data systems to ICE. And I was like, wait a second here. The companies that I teach my students to use are also selling personal data to ICE and to law enforcement agencies. And this, it was especially relevant to me because my students at CUNY were a public interest oriented law school. So my students are very often public defenders. They do immigration work as one of the core things that, one of the core things that my students do upon graduation is to represent immigrants who are trying to get through, the DHS's system and become citizens. So I thought this kind of raises red flags for me, right? That we are spending money on these companies and training our students how to use them, and they're also working on ICE's extreme vetting program. So a colleague and I wrote a blog post for the American Association of Law Libraries. The blog post didn't suggest that we do anything about the problem. It just said, hey, did you know this? Did you know that this was happening? Should we care as law librarians? I don't know. And a law librarian posted it on the American Association for Law Library websites, and within 2 minutes it was taken down. And the organization said that it was taken down on the advice of their legal counsel. They were afraid that one of these companies was going to sue them for even discussing this connection. And honestly, if the blog post hadn't been taken down, I probably wouldn't have, my research would have stopped there. I would have gotten the message out, it would have been done. But that made me realize how powerful these companies were and made me keep digging. And I realized that these companies they're not just a legal research duopoly, and they're not just the government's biggest data brokers. They also are the companies that run the majority of our academic information. So Elsevier is part of Reed Elsevier LexisNexis, so it's part of that complex as well. They invented academic metrics. Academic metrics were invented by Thomson Science, which is now Thomson Reuters. These companies own a lot of information and data, and they have a huge amount of informational power. And then digging deeper, I realized that not only do these publishers have a lot of power, they're starting to integrate our personal data into all of these metrics and data analytics programs that now run throughout their legal research products, their academic research products, and maybe their risk and policing products. We're not sure because that part of their business is very opaque. So I realized that this was bigger than a single article and bigger than, a 20-page thing. I realized I would write a book about it. And so what I've done in the book is I've explained the problem of our publishers pivoting to become data analytics companies. And then each chapter breaks the business apart market by market and shows how they're infusing data analytics into all of our informational markets across the board. Yay. Sorry, I always feel like a Debbie Downer. That's
No, it gives me a little chill. I remember when that blog post went up and then went down immediately. And you're right.
Do we have it in the archive?
I bet you do. And
yeah,
luckily, a law librarian posted it on their blog, and the blog is in the archive. So it is saved by you. Yes.
Yeah, like the speed with which our institutions back capital, I think is something really interesting and provocative. Speaking of provocative, the title Data Cartels makes me think sort of crime movie, very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about why that title?
Yeah, so I chose the title, A, because it popped in, I was like, oh, that's a title. But also, that's a book title. But also, throughout my book, I compare their activities to cartel-like activities. So cartels are monopolists that dominate a market and then use their power to shut out competition and then also to kind of intimidate people who are trying to either be consumer protection oriented or break into the market. And one of the things about cartels is they have these kind of secret implicit agreements. You'll never see an annual report saying Thomson Reuters worked with Relics and they made a decision together. That's not how cartels work. But they kind of act lockstep to decide how the market is going to work. At the same time, they both pivoted from publishing to data analytics. And I've heard rumors, and this is oftentimes what cartels are like. It's just rumors and whispers about what is happening, but they decide what companies they let coexist with them in various markets. Like in the legal market, they made a choice to allow Bloomberg Law to kind of coexist in their market because they didn't see it as a duopoly threat, but like they make these choices kind of together. And you'll notice when one of them adds one type of feature, the other company will go and adopt a similar type of feature. So even though they're not explicitly, teaming up to do this data analytics work and to kind of turn our publishing markets into data analytics markets, their work together, the combined effect of whatever it is that, they're agreeing on, whether they discuss it or not, is moving us towards a datafied and data analytics focused research world.
Is that legal?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it
Good
has
question.
to do with so technically, yes. The idea it would be something that the Federal Trade Commission would work with, something that an antitrust organization, a trust-busting organization that works to break up monopolies or to protect consumer privacy by enforcing consumer rights against kind of monopolistic companies or gigantic companies. So what my book really does is it encourages entities like the Federal Trade Commission, if they so desire, to not just focus on the big 5 tech companies. I try to pull these 2 companies and all the other data analytics companies that are similar to them into the same spotlight that the big 5 are in because I think that's important.
Great. We want to talk a little bit about issues of access and privacy and bring Brewster in the conversation. But Sarah, can you start by sort of, in the book you describe these duopolies, these companies as institutions that are messing with the internet's circulatory system. Can you elaborate on what you mean by this and the issues it creates?
Yeah, and I think, this is a perfect segue to what the Internet Archive does and what they will do in the future. So I compare, the internet itself, and this is rude. I feel bad. There's an expert sitting right next to me. I'm like, here's what the internet is. So I compare the internet to a circulatory system or a system of, a network of pipes, only so that I can show how important the information flows that go through the system are. Without information, predictive policing, data analytics would have no data to process or to crunch. Without information, our social media feeds would be empty, right? So the circulatory system of our internet needs flows of information in order to work optimally. And one thing that these companies the 2 things I really point to throughout the book are the problems of blocking access, so blocking us from having critical information we need, especially like scientific information and academic information, and also legal information. They put big paywalls in front of them. I mean, how many times have you been researching something and you hit a paywall and you're like, oh, I could either pay $50 to Springer Nature or Elsevier, or I could never know what this study says, right? Or like legal information is the same way. The only way you can get the best legal information is to subscribe to Westlaw or Lexis. If you want to know if a law is still good, or you want to see, the annotated versions of laws, the most up-to-date versions of laws, you have to pay. So that's the first issue. That's the issue of access. And then there's this other issue of privacy. So once, not only do they work as data brokers and buy data and have a whole data business, once you're in their walled garden platforms, once you've signed up to use Westlaw or Lexis or got your Elsevier access, they can track all of your research, and they know who you are. You have an identifier, and they can track what you look at, what you click, what you download. They can even put identifiers on PDFs and track those as you share them with friends or use them or print them out. So they also mess with our privacy.
Brewster, can you share a little bit about the Internet Archive's philosophy of privacy? Why is it important to your work? How does it align?
So libraries, their motto is preservation and access, right? That's sort of, those are the 2 things that we are all about. And to allow people to come up with new and different ideas that are worthy of being in the library, right? Libraries are tools to try to make more library stuff. And what's key is that people be able to explore things that they don't know well, that they feel safe being able to rummage through the stacks and pull things off and dream new dreams and make that all go. The history of libraries and the history of people taking who's checked out what book records and rounding them up and having bad things happen to them is a long and dark history. So librarians are really conscious of user data. and sort of baked into us and baked into the ALA's structures. So, great, okay, how should we run a digital library? In the age of the internet, there's basically digital exhaust that just comes out of everywhere. You just end up with these logs and crap and just this toxic waste of stuff that's sort of hanging around. And then people thought, ooh, there's gold in them thar hills, right? Of those usage data. How can we go and use that? And so, of course, there's the people who bought this, bought that, right? Those sorts of services start to show that there's real value in those things. But then how do we go and segment this and try to live a reasonable life as a library? So the Internet Archive really, I think we pioneered basically the web servers that delete their logs. In fact, don't even capture their logs. So, and it's the IP addresses are personally identifiable. So so people coming and using your website are leaving a trail of what it is they did. So when I came out, I way back when I did the Waze server, it came before the web. I put out an essay in every freeware release, which was Ethics of Digital Librarianship. And it was an essay that actually still works pretty well, because I said, even though this was 1992, that you're going to know more about your users than they know themselves, or certainly more than their spouse knows about them. And they're not even, they don't even know that they're leaving a trail on your site. So every one of you that's running a web server or a Waze server, Gopher server, whatever, you're going to come across a lot of data that you should basically treat with the same respect that you treat as if it were your employers, right? And so that was my little rant in 1992. The Internet Archive tries to live up to that by not collecting logs. And so we do collect where geographically it's from and what page they're looking at, but not the IP addresses. And it turns out it's just fine. You get you get the statistics you need and the like. It just turns out to be very hard to make your web servers do this. And it's actually very hard to guarantee that it's happening, because logs just sort of come out of almost everything. So at least the Internet Archive tries to live to that towards our user base. Then there's what happens of all the materials that are in the Internet Archive, and what's our responsibility of taking things out? And that's a real puzzle. When you get the most extreme cases, some people wanting to be taken out of the congressional record. Or they want to not be searchable and findable based on a television program that said things that they don't want available anymore. What about those? What about when people that are very prominent, like running for office or in office, want to delete their past? So things like that make it so that it's just a bit fuzzy. So we try very hard within the Internet Archive to take these questions seriously, think about them hard, talk about them, convene groups of people to go and try to answer, what should a library look like? We're at least motivated quite differently from the for-profits. And I think that helps, but we're not going to be what everybody wants, because out at the flip side of access, of universal access to all knowledge, is the privacy side. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that well? At least we're not motivated in the same way.
Yeah, that's a lot. Because it also seems like, I'm thinking about if all of the libraries I've ever worked in that had 4 people working there and 18 jobs, and the task of doing that for each individual library, the sort of web server work seems...
It's a bit challenging, but it's really quite great to be able to answer law enforcement when they come and say, well, we really want to know this about this patron, and we say, don't have it. And then they usually just go away. Sometimes they still demand it. We got a national security letter. This is one of these nasty grams that came out of the Patriot Act, where you have a gag order. Not only did we not have it, but they still demanded it. And so, and it turned out that the only way, if they demand this information on the Patriot Act, It's not like you can go back and say, get a court order or anything like that. We went to our lawyers and they said, well, the only way you can turn them down is to sue them. So we sued them and we won. That we didn't have to go and give information about a patron of the Internet Archive. It's not the right way to ask a librarian a question.
Sarah, can you elaborate a little on the issue of consolidation of power as you see it playing out in these data analytics companies?
Yeah, I think so.
Because that's really what we're up against, right? So
Yeah.
if we could all agree that this is bad, so what are we really
I
up
can
against?
easily try to sell you on the idea that this isn't ideal. Yes. So, and that's that's actually one of the reasons that organizations such as the Internet Archive are so important, because they're some of the only alternatives we have to these consolidated paywalled systems. So along with entering kind of a data analytics world and figuring out how to make money off of our personal data, these companies also part of being a cartel or being, a big industry player is being a monopolist. And these companies have cross-market monopolies, duopolies, oligopolies. So they basically run the academic market, they run the legal information market, they run the government, the personal data market, not the ad tech data, but the data that gets sold to the government, insurance companies, employers, like tenant screening services. It's called risk data. So how we're ranked according to how risky we are of committing a crime, not being able to pay our rent, what have you, being a problematic employee. They take all of our data and they rank us that way, right? So they are the masters at that type of data brokering. They also, LexisNexis has the biggest news archive in the world. I mean, that's their claim. And Thomson Reuters has its own news agency, Reuters News. So they have a lot of informational power, right? They run these markets. And part of that is they also swallow up competitors, right? So I know I'm most familiar with the legal information market, right? So we don't even get that excited now when we see new legal information startups, like new platforms that are setting out to compete against them, because we know that 99% of the time, these two companies are either going to buy them out or sue them out of existence. Last year, a company called Ross that was trying to make a legal information platform, they got put out of business, frivolous copyright litigation by Westlaw that they would have won. They would have won their case, but the litigation drained all of their money. And they countersued Thomson Reuters and Westlaw for antitrust, for being a monopoly and using that power to shut them out of the market. So that litigation is ongoing, but I don't know how they're supporting it because they already spent all of their they spent all their litigation money on the first lawsuit. It's a whole other problem. And they've both, for some reason, both companies, I've heard from market analysts that they've decided to let Bloomberg Law just hang out in the marketplace with them. But other than that, they've either cannibalized or shut down every competitor. And you see it in the academic market. Like there used to be B-Press, Mendeley. There used to be these preprint, companies that were separate. Reed Elsevier LexisNexis owns all of those companies now. So yeah, they're constantly acquiring cool new upstarts that could disrupt the market. So it's really important to have organizations like the Internet Archive that are not looking to be bought out and can withstand kind of these pressures that these companies exert on them.
Is that sort of how you see the Internet Archive working, Brewster, as an alternative, as a counterweight to those?
We're designed to not be acquirable. Right, and because all the temptation is to find synergy to go and which is really a way to make CEOs rich, right? And actually, I benefited from selling out. I know exactly what the forces are, and you're absolutely right. These things get gobbled up. I love that you're talking about. A lot of the focus right now is how big and awful and evil the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Googles, and Amazon, and I'm not going to defend them, but there is not enough focus on the Thomson Reuters, the Murdoch empires, the big content folks, the Elsevier's, those places are huge. And the level of control they have all the way down into newspaper reporters, right? You wonder why there's not a lot of reporting on this stuff. They have book deals that they'd really like to get from a Random House, Penguin, Simon Schuster, and so we've got to, I commend you. I think that if we can bring some focus to some of the real problems of the lack of antitrust. So the Internet Archive, Wikipedia, we last a lot longer. I'd say, I think the nonprofit, the 501c3 nonprofit in the United States is one of the best innovations the United States has done since World War II. It's an interesting, they're transparent, you can go and see certain things, you can see how much the top people are paid, just by going to a public website. They're interesting, and it's a good, interesting counterweight, and they're a lot like how organizations used to be before we let trusts get out of control. So anyway, 501c3s, and so yes, I designed the Internet Archive to be not acquirable.
So I'm solution-oriented. I like to win, right? Like what do we want and how are we going to win it? And that's like the dry question I wake up every morning asking. So how are we going to win, Sarah? Do you see any kind of a solution coming from the legal side to the issues that you're describing in your book?
So I feel like I say this all the time now. I say intervention and transparency. So first, we need more transparency about what these companies are doing, especially on the private data side. We need to force them to disclose how their algorithms work, what data they're collecting, how they're using it across their products, who they're selling it to, right? Right now, we don't have any control over that. We also need to be able to opt in and make sure that we know and have consented to data collection, and that we can correct our records if there's mistaken data in our files. But then the other part, I think, is really another place where the Internet Archive comes in. We need to intervene, and first we need to break away the data collection part, the data analytics and data brokering part of these businesses from the research platforms, because like Brewster said, research platforms should be non-surveillant by their nature. That's just a basic librarian concept, intellectual freedom. Like the American Library Association has a whole office called the Office of Intellectual Freedom, and it's to make sure not only that books aren't being censored and that information's not being censored, but that we are allowed to search without fear of surveillance, right? And we need to, so my solution is that the government and who knows, they could get the money from taxing, I don't know, the big 5 tech companies and Thomson Reuters and all these companies. But they need to better support a public infrastructure that's non-surveillant, and they need to make sure that like the innovations like 501c3s, like the Internet Archive, have what they need in order to not be ephemeral. They have what they need in order to be structurally sound and be permanent, and that's just the building. It's not necessarily, I don't think it's turning information structures into like a public utility, but it is making sure that informational structures have the support they need so that they don't go away, right? Like I rely on, for a lot of my work, Cornell's Legal Information Institute. There are legal information institutes all over the world. Yeah, so good. But they rely heavily on the goodwill of donors and of other entities. And if they have trouble funding themselves, then all that information will go away, right? So we need to make sure that there's enough money to not just support these institutions, these digital institutions, but also to make sure that they can be adequately staffed and maintained, right? All the costs that come along with maintaining a robust information system.
Did you have something to add?
So if I can sum, it was like, let's browbeat and try to regulate the big, awful organizations into being better. Okay, let's try. I've got another one.
Okay,
I
good.
got another
I
one.
love
All right. Okay, I'm gonna beat up on librarians right now, and because I think
we really need that right now, Brewster. Thank you. Yeah.
because, but I'm gonna beat it up with a very particular positive way that we can move forward, and I think it's time to reinvigorate and re-empower the library system. So back in the old days, and it didn't work all that great, it was paper-based world. So publishers would go and publish something, libraries would buy them, they would be in public libraries and subscription libraries like this, which would be kind of awesome. And it was an abundance model. It was if you're going to have democracies, you're going to have educated citizens. It's worth it for taxpayers to go and fund the publications that fund the authors, to go and make it so that these materials are permanently available in the library system. That was the paper era. It had problems to it. I'm not going to be rosy-glassed about that. In fact, I had to break into the Harvard Law Library to be able to get access because I went to the other school down the river, and we didn't have a law library. But anyway, so there were problems to this, but that was the model. Then the mainframe era came along, and so basically some companies set up and said, we're going to go and digitize these things and sell it back to the libraries. We went into a scarcity model. The librarians turned into subscribers to these things and became customer service departments for database products. It is that bad. And so these large corporations and nonprofits that acted that way basically controlled the preservation, the access, the organization structure of what it is patrons could see in this mainframe era. So, bad, right? We basically get the LexisNexuses, the Westlaws, the Elsevieres all being built up and funded by the library system. Shame on us. JSTOR, I'd end up with a bunch of people that would be in this sort of mainframe era approach. So, what do we do now?
Can I push against that just a little bit,
Okay.
Brewster? It's not as if libraries were sort of resourced in such a way that they could do the work that you are sort of laying at their feet. That if we want to look at what happened, right, like the disinvestment in public institutions is happening simultaneous to this. So as I'm listening to both of you talk, I'm thinking about the way that one of the ways neoliberalism works, and we can date that back to the Reagan era, right, is to take everything and break it up into the tiniest sort of monetizable, sellable thing possible. So the idea that librarians would be sort of the responsible parties, I think I find that like a broad brush.
Okay, all right, it's a little obnoxious.
A little, but we can all.
But I'm going to bring it up again. So I think we can go back to an abundance model. The internet era is one that works well based on abundance. Think Wikipedia, right? So they give away their product, yet they're a $120 million a year organization. Not enough money, but going well. The Internet Archive, give it away. Their public library science, give it away. We can go back to an abundance model based on the internet. I think we can do this specifically in the law case by going and digitizing all of the works of government and all of the capturing the websites of all of these and creating services that would be really up and running services that would have, say, all of the law. Because you're right? Harvard went and worked with Revell Digital to go and digitize all the case law, and they were going to get it back, after 6 years. This is 2024, which is cool, and it's great. Zittrain says we're going to get it in 2024, but it got bought by LexisNexis. Ta-da! So they basically kept hoovering things together. We have an opportunity, if we want it, to go and work on going and building services that are abundance model services that have the types of quality guarantees, non-surveillance guarantees, to do it especially in the works of governments. And I use plural because it's not just the United States government, federal government, they're all the states, but there's the other democracies of the world. They're all designed, democracies need an educated populace, so they publish openly. Let's these materials in general are not online, if at all, or they're in some database product. It's like you can't even find it. So why don't we go and invest in what is it should be the low-hanging fruit, and let's get all of that material up and out, and do it by libraries, for the public. And if we can go and do this, and it turns out it's just not that hard anymore to digitize it all. I think Democracy's Library is what we're calling this project. I think it's about $100 million. That's a big number. Is it accurate? I don't know. It's probably around there, maybe by a factor of 2 or something like that, to go and take the works of the United States, all the states, Canada, other democracies, and digitize it all, collect all of the materials that are coming out of websites, and go and make a real shot, at least for things like all the legal materials, and have that be available again. And it's reinvigorating the library system. We're about a $12 billion a year industry in the United States. That's a lot of money. In fact, people really believe in their libraries. It's one of the last trusted institutions of government. All right, people like their libraries. They keep the funding going. But I think we're spending our money wrong. We're $3 or $4 billion a year goes to publishers' products. Great, fine. Don't spend less, but own something at the end of the day. Don't just license something such that you don't have a collection, which is what's being thrown down our throats. And so I think we, libraries, have some work to do. We have new tools, we've got inspiring technologies, and people that will help to be able to make something to, at least for your law part, can work. This doesn't get around all of the bugging of the phones, and there's other bad news bears going along in this. We still need antitrust. But I think we can go and build a better internet by going and putting a layer of foundational information available that is not surveilled, it is vetted. Not everything the government's put out are accurate. I won't go to truth, but that I think can help us make some really positive steps to have a more informed civic conversation about what's going on, because we're hitting paywalls all the time. We're getting these $35 to go and see a scientific journal article for 30 days. I mean, this is stupid. OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House, said that all the government-funded research has to be public. I think pretty soon. That was a pronouncement that was pretty bold. Europe has gone along those ways. Let's take them up on the offer and show what the world can and should be, which is much more open, much more transparent, less surveillance, less creepy, and more reliable that we can build on.
Yeah, I mean, one of my first interactions as a librarian with a patron 20 years ago in a New York Public Library branch, a guy came in, he wanted to find out some information to help his brother who was incarcerated fight his case. And I was like, there's got to be some way to help this guy, right? And there was no way to help that guy. And it was stunning. And it sounds like it's only a worse problem now. So you sound quite passionate about Democracy's Library. Brewster, what was the impetus for the idea, the project? Like what feels like now it needs to be what the Internet Archive is focused on?
So the Internet Archive is trying to build a library of everything.
Yeah.
And so we started media type by media type. So web, television, books. We've done a lot on periodicals and trying to figure out how to get that more available. And then in the beginning of the pandemic, the publishers sued us for something that hundreds of libraries have been doing for 10 years, which is digitizing and lending our dusty musties, right? Taking our things from the mid-20th century and making some level of access, and the publisher said, no! And it's like, holy crow, really? Are we going to go and do this again over digitized PDFs of old stuff? And I guess that's what they wanted to do. So that's running along, and I thought about what's the other parts of the library that's not really out there. and it's government documents. It's not, it's the law. It's these things. And there's just been fighting and fighting and fighting. I think we did something wrong. And so, and really, I'm trying this out, and this is a small enough group. I'd really love your feedback. I think that we, in the internet sphere, did some things wrong. We tried to browbeat publishers or government agencies into being their own archives. So you think of the work of Carl Malamud, which I hold in very high esteem. He's tremendous. To go and make it so that the Patent and Trademark Office would go and make their own database, the SEC to make their own database, to go and try to get, if you're going to get the old Atlantic magazines in digital form, you're going to go to atlanticmagazine.com or whatever it is. In the old days, we used to go to the library. What happened to the library? So why didn't we in the library world sort of spring into it? And I think that was sort of why didn't we go and do those services that we used to do in the paper world in the digital world? And it might have been money, might have been technical expertise, might have been other things, but I think we should go and fix it. So why? We need the government information. Democracies are under threat. The role of democracies and openness have always been highly aligned. Authoritarians and corporations are not innately open. But democracies and libraries have always been overlapping. Let's go and reinforce our democratic institutions from within our own. It's something I can do. It's something the Internet Archive can do. I think it's what we can do to try to make it so that we have a democracy to pass on, democracies to pass on to the next generation. We need access to information. We need an educated populace. We need a mechanism that can get you access no matter who you are. The publishers are starting to turn off libraries and not allowing them to license ebooks at all, certain sets of them, because they don't want to service those people. I don't know. I mean, something's going really wrong. So let's do what we can to go and make it so that we have an educated populace. Otherwise, I think we'll have regrets.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like the problem is at the site of the publishers and a little less at the library. But